Well, that's my cue. Um, Welcome, everybody, to the Thursday, February 20th, 2025 Legislative Committee meeting. We'll start this out with agenda item number 1. Start with the roll call.
Excuse me. Legislative Committee Chair Tom Handy.
Here.
Council Chair Todd Bayrether.
Here.
Council Vice Chair Jay Arnold.
Yeah.
Hear you. MVPE Committee Chair Damon Doyle. And I'm not seeing him in the room today. BFRW Committee Chair Roger Haringa. He let us know that he's here but in his car, and if you can't respond, it's okay.
I am here.
Gotcha. Council Member Chell Anderson. Not seeing them in the room today. Council Member Matthew Hepner. Not seeing them in the room today. And Council ex officio member Representative Alex Rammel. And I'm not seeing them in the room today. So with that, we do have a quorum. And when Roger leaves, we will suffer lack of quorum unless we get some other members here. And I'll monitor the guest list while we go through today's agenda.
Okay, very good. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to be recognized? I see no hands. I'll take that as a no, not today, Tom. Thanks. Okay. All right. Next on the agenda then is review and approve the agenda.
This is Todd. I move to approve.
Been moved
Second.
and seconded. Any discussion?
Just agenda item number 3. The minutes weren't ready. We had some staff absences in the time between the meetings, and so those aren't quite ready yet. We don't need an agenda item number 3.
Okay, then we will table item number 3 then, if that's okay with the makers of the motion.
Yes.
That's fine.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Item number 3 is tabled. Item number 4, legislative update. Dustin, you want to start your show here?
Let me get our tracking sheet up and running here and adjust my screen share. All right, so we should have the legislative tracking for week 6 up on the screen. I will make it a little bit larger. And so there's no new bills on this list here this week. There has been some movement on a couple of them. The SHB 1254, the Wildland Urban Interface, there's a new version out there and has some changes in it, but they're not necessarily different from the previous version, other than there is the council is allowed to do work on an optional WUI code for implementation with the 2024 codes. I know there's some criticism for whether or not that work should occur or not, but at this point, this one is an optional body of work, and the council can decide to move with this one for the 2024 codes, or we can start. Todd?
Oh, you could have completed your
Okay,
sentence.
sorry. Or we can start work for the 2027 stuff and start addressing building hardening and defensible space and other sections that may not be applicable due to other statute in Washington. And so that's the end of that thought. Todd?
So I had a question on this. If the council chooses to do an optional appendix, I guess, and then it's adopted locally, then once permanent rulemaking does happen after the maps, that preempts then that local adoption, right?
Correct. So the way it sits right now, local jurisdictions are allowed to adopt a portion, or they're allowed to adopt the model WUI code or a portion thereof. And then the way this new bill reads is that 90 days after the creation of an optional code by the SBCC, local jurisdictions should enforce to that version of the Washington or the WUI code. And the new version of this bill also allows for local amendments to the WUI code with the provision that anything affecting residential construction must get the approval of SBCC before becoming effective.
So if I understand that correctly, they could adopt, if it was an optional code was developed for 2024, they could adopt that, they could amend it.
Yes.
Then if the permanent WUI code is adopted in presumably 2027 code, that will preempt everything.
Yes, sir.
And then they could go and then create amendments to that also. And if they're related to housing per SCW, they have, okay.
Yes.
I think I get it.
Shane?
Yeah, this is Shane Ellis, the American Wood Council. I also want just a little additional clarification on that. I've looked at that bill, and I understand the trigger on the optional code saying that 90 days after that completion that would then basically put an end to those local adoptions that are allowed for that section. But what happens if that optional code is not created by the SBCC? In that instance, would that, and they just go to regular rulemaking, they skip the option, but then I believe 2029, the adoption of the code through the normal path, would that process then and that adoption also put, I don't know, that better phrase it, put an end to or preempt those local adoptions, since it's not clearly written?
I believe so, that yes, once the WUI code is produced for the 2027 codes in conjunction with the statewide mapping, that the optional adoption of the model code or the optional adoption of a optional code produced by SBCC will no longer be an option for the local jurisdictions. If there's local amendments that are desired to be brought, they would still need to come, well, as long as they only impact, or if they impact the residential construction, then they need to come to SBCC for approval. If they are just for all other types of construction, that can be done at the local level without input from the SBCC. And I guess sections of this code that I anticipate potentially always needing the input from SBCC is the building hardening section. I do believe we could potentially consider defensible space not directly impacting residential construction, but it's something that's still a question in my mind, because the defensible space and building hardening are going to go hand in hand. But since defensible space occurs outside of the building, it might be up for some interpretation.
Okay, because you just you just said that when the mapping is done and I guess the final rulemaking occurs, then the optional code would go away. But what I'm trying to specifically get to is that if the optional code is never even used, then would that 2029 adoption make it so that, I believe that's at section 2 for the local cities, counties, and towns, would that make that no longer applicable? Because I just don't see where it explicitly says that, but I think maybe Todd's question is there other rules that by nature of SBCC adoption that that those local adoptions or amendments suddenly go, they just don't have enforceability unless it's going back through the SBCC?
That is my interpretation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Micah?
Thanks, Dustin. I was going to say to Shane, I think that is included in section 2, item 7 of this new substitute bill. And it may be helpful if the bill is shown on the screen. But I believe that kind of clears up that question, Shane, but maybe not 100%, but I do believe it talks about that. Thanks.
I've got a question that's been posed to me a couple of times too about this bill, and I haven't read it probably as thoroughly as I maybe should have, but people were concerned about fire flows from, residential properties in the interface areas in rural areas that, and according to their reading of it, may be unattainable, especially if they're, not in neighborhoods or clustered where there's a big well and they're just on, regular 5,000 gallon a day wells. Mike
So,
had an answer to that.
well, I was just going to say that the water regulations and apparatus access are both controlled by different statute in the state of Washington. So those specific sections would be a target for the way it was done in 2021, which those sections were labeled as not adopted. And so the fire flows, while maybe not being possible to have out there, are regulated kind of at that local level by ordinance.
Okay.
Micah?
Yeah, I'll add a little more to that. That is, Dustin is 100% correct on that. That was the reason most of chapter 4 was struck out in the last version that was put forth by the full council. They're regulated elsewhere. The WUI code as written has nothing to do with fire flow. That is a misconception that has been interpreted by some. And what the WUI code regulates or identifies is a complying or conforming water supply. That is, as Justin mentioned, mandated by other RCWs up to the jurisdiction on what a conforming water supply is. So that is still left alone and should be left alone, in my opinion, in upcoming versions that may be adopted by the SBCC. And I will advocate for that as well, Tom, just so you know. Yeah, that's not something WUI code is going to look at, fire flow. The state specifically does not look at it for Appendix D of the fire code, where a lot of that is identified, but fire flow is set by the individual jurisdiction under different authority. Thanks.
Thanks. That's very helpful.
Gotcha. Any other questions on this particular bill before I move away from it?
There's something that broader question in section 2, when we commonly, or statute commonly says adopt by November 1st, 2029, which is really the implementation date. We're required to adopt by December 1st the year before, but I know that this isn't the first bill that says that. Is it just understood?
Yeah, so on that note, to align with other sections of RCW that give us a date, we've put the implementation date rather than an adoption date as the goal there. So the intent is to have it implemented there, and the conversation I had is, in this language, does adopt mean implement, or does implement mean implement? And so just because in other sections we have our implementation date is listed, in some of our statute there's some old implementation date of July 1, which is the only place it's listed for our adoption is getting it done for the legislature in, I believe, 19-27032 for December 1 of most codes. And then the specific section in 1927A for the energy codes, it lists the date of December 15th.
Okay.
So I'm just kind of following a tradition.
Okay. Everyone then knows that the intent here would be adopted by December 1st, 2028 for implementation the next year.
Yes.
Kind of inside baseball. I'm not sure everybody understands. Okay.
That was a much easier sentence than the stuff I spit out. So thank you.
Okay.
Justin, I can't raise my hand, but I just have a question about that. Is there any way we can
urge them to clarify that. I mean, if it's the language, if it's changing implement for the word adopt, and that cleared up that issue for everybody, are we still able to influence that by making that suggestion?
We can make the suggestion. There's still a room for that to happen, but we would have other RCW sections that aren't in play within this legislative session that still have an implementation date as the adoption date. And so just trying to stick with the mechanism that's in place right now. We know that we need it done by the December 1 or December 15th, the year prior to implementation. And so that's just kind of where we're at.
I just would lean towards, let's start, if there's RCWs that are asking us to do that we make that clear and we don't continue the confusion. I understand there's confusion on existing bills, but anyway, not a big deal, but
Well, I think so. We've been talking about this group working a little bit outside of legislative session to potentially address issues just like what we're talking about right now. And so I will definitely make a reach out to the sponsor of this bill and offer up an implementation date versus an adoption date and see if it's received well. And then as part of our work outside of the session, we can start strategizing agency proposed legislation to potentially change the implementation or get the dates listed as a layperson would be able to understand and adopt versus implement.
And as a side, the single exit still says July 1st, adopt by July 1st, to my understanding.
Yes. All right. Moving back
Which it will be adopted. It won't be implemented.
Correct. So we'll have it adopted. So I agree that the disparity between adoption and implementation can be confusing, and so is definitely a question I've considered as we navigate this session. Looking to the embodied carbon bill, there is a new version of that one out there. The change is a little interesting. I'm going to bring up the bill language here. The main change, other than some clarifying language across this bill, is in, I believe, section 5. Hold on, let me get to it. This one here, section 7. Previously in the old version of this one spelled out a specific membership of the tag that was being asked to be formed.
Dustin, I think you need to change your screen, please.
Oh, you're correct. Sorry. So if I didn't show any of the WUI code bill last time, that is my apologies there. So let me update this share. All right. So we should see the embodied carbon bill up here currently, and section 7 has been modified, and previously there was a specific tag and tag membership outlined in this section. This one takes that away, and the testimony that Chell gave at the hearing on this one indicated that the IBC tag has been doing this work and is well positioned to continue this work. This change here, though, identifies a existing technical work group established in RCW 39.116.050. This is a Department of Commerce RCW, and with our current analysis on this one, to work with that group to do this work for the SBCC, there might be some cost incurred upon the Department of Commerce in which SBCC might be billed for. And so we're reaching out to make sure that this is the avenue that is desired for us. I believe the intent seems to be to work with our existing tags and to try to offer up the change that Chell was mentioning. So we're doing some reach out on this one to make sure this is exactly what is intended. We're planning to offer up language that would point to the International Building Code tag that's been working on this topic so far. And that is the main update for this bill. Most of the rest of the language changes in here just clarify the intent of what is being asked for this bill. Are there any questions or comments on this one?
I have a couple if we don't mind going a little deep on this, if that's all right
Don't
with
mind.
everyone. First, I was in an industry workshop last night that was discussing this. One of the questions that came up, which was interesting, was what are the emergency clauses, if any, in this? And after thinking of it overnight, I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of not confusion, but just a lot of education needed to understanding what's going on in the external petition in the current code cycle, going into potentially a appendix for a local adoption versus this, which is mandating, right? A legislative mandate to say you're going to put this in the IBC. And then in that discussion, what's appropriate in policy versus what's appropriate in rulemaking. So the question specifically to that emergency clause, if there's a pandemic, whatever it might be, right? That doesn't typically exist in the policy if it's directing rulemaking, because we already have that emergency pathway in rulemaking. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, we do have the emergency pathway. As far as stuff needing an emergency pathway, I don't necessarily see that 100%, but we do have some goals for the 2024 code that are outlined in section 8 of this bill. So we see it is, there we go. This section right here says we need to have some product declarations or whole building, or this section indicates we need something in the 2024 code. And so right now we're still working on the embodied carbon appendix within the IBC. And once this passes, or if this passes out of a legislative session in April, there's a good chance that the IBC tag will be substantially done with the embodied carbon work, and this will need some additional work at that point. In looking at the timelines we have established for the remaining of the 2024 code cycle to try to be complete this December, the work would need a little bit of out of cycle, attention from the IBC tag to do this work. And then the rest of this, I don't see as necessarily being emergent in nature to address the 27 and 2030 codes.
I'll ask the question differently. If, like during the pandemic on heat pumps, there's a supply chain constraint on something, on a material, say steel or concrete or whatever it's going to be, that makes it hard to achieve this, can we provide that off-ramp in rulemaking, and it doesn't, in our opinion, have to be done in the statute, or shouldn't be done? I think so, but I think that was the question, is they were asking, should it be hard written into policy?
Well, that is, like you said, it's not hard written out here, and I think that we are empowered to do some rulemaking to make provisions like that, but it's something I hadn't considered as part of this bill.
I would agree with you that we have the ability to deal with that if needed in rulemaking. And the suggestion that every single policy is going to try to look ahead and foresee every possible emergency and have that written into the RCW is a little bit daunting, and how much that work would be and how accurate, and I question how accurate it could be. So I think the emergency, yes, I believe we always have the ability to make modifications in an emergency situation like that, and to try to integrate that into this policy It's just like when and under what conditions, and you would never be able to identify every potential situation that might require an emergency. So I don't know why it would be written into the legislation. That's my opinion.
Micah?
Thanks. Some great questions, Todd. I have some similar type concerns, but I think they're more specific to the specifics of the bill that ties our hands on that. I think that's maybe where you're going, at least in my interpretation of what you're saying. Kind of going off of what Roger's saying, you don't want specifics in here on every emergency item, but yet this bill has many specifics that we would tie our hands in an emergency rulemaking situation. In other words, it ties you to specific standards. It ties you to specific sections of standards. It ties you to specific products that are only captured in the 2024 code cycle. I mean, that's what's highlighted on the screen here. It only ties you only to type 3 EPDs. There's nothing else you can use, even in an emergency rulemaking session. So I think that, you have to look at it both ways. And in some ways, yes, there's some very, very specific items in here that you couldn't affect in emergency rulemaking. And I think that's what Todd is going towards. I have concerns about those specifics because it is, like Todd mentions, in the pandemic, we had some leeway, but you might not have it based on the language of this law. I'll share my personal opinion. I think this is a premature bill pushed by the sponsor of the code change in appendix that's going into the building code. We've we've discussed heavily at the building code tag that some of the language that is specific in this legislation was specific in the public building legislation, similar to this, that it doesn't work when it comes to enforceable code language. And yet here it is again. It's unfortunate. I think this bill is maybe one code cycle premature. It'd be nice to get that appendix in, see how that plays out for use. And if we can affect code language changes, then maybe this bill would direct you to do so. But again, this bill, like the previous one, ties our hands in certain ways. With the appendix and applying it across the board without it only applying to public buildings, we weren't as tied to certain specifics, but now this legislative language is going to tie us in certain areas. Again, which we have spoken out against as a council on the WUI code bill. And of course, I'm not a member of the council any longer, but I think, again, there's some issues with this entire bill that we should have some concerns with when trying to adopt or create enforceable language behind this. This is different than the Appendix A language that the building code tag put forward for this exact topic. So I have some concerns myself, but I think the council should as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I think you are hitting on a couple of the key points there. And I think if there's an opportunity for us to be constructive to the design, to the intent of what the sponsors are trying to achieve here, it could be that we just start highlighting some of the things that are overlap with what could or is happening in rulemaking. Now, granted, these are two separate things, right? No one, that was a voluntary petition. No one, it was not mandated to submit, but I don't think it's a bad thing that they're happening at the same time so that we can have this discussion about what happens in the political sphere and what happens in the technical sphere and getting to things like highlighting, should 50,000 square feet, should that be a legislative mandate or should that be a technical discussion on what makes the most sense off the data and so forth. And I'm not taking a position, but that's a good example. What if we take analogies to the energy code? What was the purpose of the legislative mandate? It was to set targets and timelines and things like that, to say, now go chase this down in the technical, sphere of how you do that versus what you're going to do. So I think there is some opportunity here if it, if it goes to the floor and goes through to the next, to the next body, maybe that's the opportunity to kind of really help inform that balance, and we'll also be further along in the IBC petition. Thank you.
Micah?
Thanks. Yeah, Todd, I agree with you on being constructive in this bill. The downside, I think, to being constructive on this bill, though, would be the majority of it would have a strike through as a recommendation because it has so many technical specifics in it. Again, this is where the SBCC needs to say, hey, tell us the policy, which is look at embodied carbon, just like you said. Does that apply to 50,000 square foot buildings or 5,000 square foot buildings? If the products that are used in each are similar, then we're just looking at the products, not the structure or the size. So I don't know how to be constructive other than maybe there's a whole lot of strike through that could occur and still get this bill through, but I'm not sure that's going to be approved since I believe there's a lot of support for this bill as written, which is again unfortunate because of the technical specifics in it. But that would be my only way to be constructive is say, get rid of the technical specifics. We'll do this under your policy. Obviously give us the percentage reductions sections here that you have, but the itemized specifics that make up the majority of this bill would probably need to have a strike through. Thanks.
One more comment I have, or question I have, and I need to do a little more research on this. In section 8, in subsection 1, I need some help understanding is that when they, so this would be an example where, no, you're in the right place.
Oh, sorry.
Section 8. So does that sets a target, right? So like we just talked about, maybe that's a good policy, recommendation. I don't have enough knowledge here. Does that mean a 30% reduction in the emissions on a project-wide static baseline? So does that, I'm a little confused between the prescriptive and the performance approach, the materials approach versus the design approach. I would just need, somebody knows the answer and it's probably obvious, but I'm not clear if that's 30% in just the whole building LCA or if it is also just the materials. And then I know there's also talk and it was presented last night on what the phase out is of that materials approach. So is there enough room for us to do that as the whole building LCA improves and then the rulemaking process can evaluate every 3-year cycle how far along it is and whether it's time to start to phase out that materials only approach. And just like we do in the energy code, every 3 years we look at it and say, are we on target? What's the new knowledge, new modeling capabilities, so forth for baselining, benchmarking, and what gives us enough flexibility to do that?
Micah?
Well, and I'll stop talking as much as possible, but Todd, you're on the right path. I think those criteria or a lot of those answers would have been provided by that work group that was guided by the last legislation that was not done. I think we would have gotten a lot of answers from that work group that didn't occur before the report was completed and the proposed code language was done.
Well, that work group is starting up, as you might know.
Right, but again, this is going to say do this no matter what,
Okay.
and the answers may change once that work group completes their evaluation of everything. Again, like I said, I think this is just maybe one code cycle premature, even one legislative cycle premature, based on where the work is in process right now. But great questions. This is a tough one for everybody, I think. Thanks.
All righty. Moving on from 1458 into
Dustin, I don't have a hand raised, but I need to take off, so I'm afraid you're not going to have a quorum moving forward.
10-4 looking. I don't see any new members here. So Roger, thanks for the attendance here today. And we'll continue to discuss, but no official action can occur.
Okay.
Thanks again. All right, moving on, I have the State Building Code Council Bill 5429. No changes in this one. We haven't had an opportunity to talk about this as a full council. There's been some concerns raised about the construction industry being overrepresented as compared to the rest of the composition of the Building Code Council. I would leave it up to the council to deliberate if there's needs to be any official position on this one. But we can't make a motion on anything here today. So since there's no movement there, I'll was going to move on, but Jay, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just to note, tomorrow is the policy cutoff for bills to pass out of a policy committee. And just looking at the upcoming Senate Local Government Committee, nothing scheduled for this bill. So it may not be moving forward.
Gotcha. Thank you, Jay. Anything else before I move on from this one? All right.
No, I was just gonna comment, likewise, that I think they probably got enough feedback from so many different groups that this kind of didn't really fix anything for everybody, and a lot of people all had similar concerns, but focused in different areas. And so maybe it wasn't as broke as, or maybe there's a different way to fix it. I don't know, but.
Jay, I saw your hand flash. You still need to say anything? All right, we'll move on. The next one, SB 5552, the Kit Homes Building one. This one has got a due date of December 31st of this year to bring in provisions for Kit Homes in the building codes. We've had some outreach with the sponsor on this bill, and I think we have a little bit better understanding. You know, we're not trying to address all codes with the Kit Homes, mainly just the building and the building codes, which will address the shell of the building, not necessarily the mechanical, electrical, plumbing portions of that building. And Todd, you've got some good knowledge on things that have been happening in regards to Kit Homes outside of this bill. Is there anything else that we should characterize before moving on from this one?
Yeah, I think it's important to share because we did have the conversation to inform to Senator Wilson, and one was, Dustin, so the staff could, give an update on the resources needed to do that. And then in that, I asked a few questions to help better understand what the intent is. If I remember correctly, this one is asking for a kit home, which to me reads as a pre-manufactured is in the language, I believe. So what's the pathway for a pre-manufactured assemblies that could build up to an 800 square foot building, which is not trivial, right? So it's the question was, that's a large ADU, or that's an ADU size, or do you mean something that's more of a shelter, such as a pallet home or something like that, or is it somewhere in between? And so we'll see how this goes. I think there are pathways that there have been ANSI standards developed very recently in 2021, I think in 23, directly related to prefabrication of assemblies. So that the world is moving towards that, having open to closed walls, pre-certified in factories. And so that could be a line going down, and L&I was mentioned multiple times, but L&I is more of certifying 6-sided boxes usually. And so there's some question on, are you asking L&I to certify assemblies and components in factories, or is it jurisdictions? And so these ANSI standards that were developed start to address the construction and the acceptance of those assemblies. And there's also a guideline. And so other states are starting to adopt this. Colorado is the example that does it really well, but it's adopted through other agencies, kind of like their L&I, or it's through that enforcement side, not necessarily through the codes. So I bring all this up because it sounds like a couple a couple amendment proposals are going to be dropped in this group 2 for ICC 2027 that do give examples of how to write those references into the IRC and the IBC. So while that process is just beginning, there are others that are thinking about how this would weave into code rulemaking rather than kind of the other agency enforcement rulemaking. I'm not sure that's what the sponsor intended, but we were trying to lay out that whole spectrum and complexity of everything from what is a HUD home, what is a tiny home or tiny house, what you're talking about here is a module or modular components, in my mind, that get assembled on site.
Gotcha.
What's the
And,
discussion on that $150 thing in section 3?
It's been taken out. I'm sorry.
Has
There's a proposed amendment to strike that, and the sponsor indicated that was anticipated.
Okay,
So
I just see
it shows up on the committee documents. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
and the emergency clause at the bottom.
I didn't,
Or-
Dustin, I didn't see that though. Do you have that strikeout there? I didn't see it in an amendment, but
It's
It's not on the current one. It's not struck out. That's the current. It's not struck out.
oh, sorry.
yeah. I saw a Lovelet amendment that strikes the $150, but I didn't see.
So I believe this section is what's anticipated to be struck. It's not necessarily declaring an emergency, but that language, you can find that specific language in the APA for emergency rulemaking.
Okay, I think the amendment is actually a striker, and then the striker doesn't have the section 4 in it. So I think that's where it's taken. It's just not flagged on the top that it's doing that. Oh, no, it does. It does say the effect removes the $150 per square foot monetary limit on rulemaking and the emergency clause. So the striker removes it.
So down there, section 4 is removed. So this is something new that was just forwarded to me. And so yeah, the $150 is removed, and the emergency clause, which was section 4 down there.
Okay.
So continuing to work with that one and deliver some information to the sponsor about ANSI standards, and to make sure that SBCC can be successful with the task that's being handed down.
Dustin, one quick thing on that.
Do you want me to bring back the bill language?
Well, no, on the list here, isn't 5249 somewhat related, because that's then the
It is
land use or development code companion.
yeah, it is related, but since the bill there doesn't impact the SBCC RCW, the analysis on this one is that it doesn't have a large effect or actually any impact for SBCC. It will impact the local jurisdictions and officials who are trying to cite these homes, but all the changes here, they make some references to the building codes, but don't direct us to do anything with this particular bill.
Okay, it just says that it can be with or without a permanent foundation, but that's pretty common in the definition of kit home. So, okay, thanks.
And that brings us to the last one of high concern, which is the Senate Bill 5747, which is an affordable housing exemption. We've talked about this one, and Jay was gracious enough to testify yesterday on this, and I think he did a great job there. The committee didn't have any questions for us. They just listened to the testimony and kept going. But the main concern primarily for SBCC is that if this passes, we see it as needing 4 4 iterations of the code being active in the WAC. And there's a large process involved in recreating past codes for the WAC there, and we'd have to rearrange the way we do the WAC. We could leave all of WAC 51 alone, but we'd have to create a new, like maybe WAC 52, 53, and so on to have the older codes available. And then into the future, the oldest one would drop off while we add the newest one on there. And so there's an administrative issue for SBCC as far as maintaining all of that WAC language. We see difficulties for local jurisdictions to enforce to multiple codes or combinations of codes. It's not 100% clear what is allowed and not allowed on this one. And I'll pause there for Micah.
I was actually going to ask if Jay could share what his testimony on this was or position would be helpful for the discussion if you got a minute to do so.
Sure. I testified as other, given that that's what the extent of the authorization we have for actions coming out of this committee, and not something voted on by the full Building Code Council, and basically made the 3 points that Justin just made. That there's a workload for maintaining the last 4 codes, that we would have to reorganize the codes within the WAC, and that the bill is ambiguous on the mixing and matching of codes, both with the Building and Energy Code and potentially with the other codes as well. The other thing that I would note is this also would have to be taken action in the Housing Committee tomorrow to move forward, and it is not on their agenda for tomorrow morning. So hopefully this bill is not moving forward.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Dustin. Yeah, hopefully it's not moving forward. This is, aside from all the stuff with SBCC, I think this would cause a major issue for the jurisdictions that provide modifications to the code. How many code cycles back do we have to maintain? Again, the mixing and matching, we don't do that now. And then the question for the SBCC would be, does that mean we're going to go back and bring back all the previous amendments to those versions of the code, which who knows where those have landed or have gone? But I think this hopefully dies. Please. Thanks.
Well,
Yeah, and Micah, somebody from the Washington Association of Building Officials was actually testifying against this bill.
Tim Woodard.
Yeah, and if I may add, Tim did a great job of trying to create that separation of life safety and things that could be considered, such as energy code and so forth, because if this were to move forward, I think we do have to take more of a stance I guess I'm even opposed to the first part of the section that sets the intent, where it says one reason housing units are not being built to meet the demands because the owner is building codes. So you're folding all building codes into this one statement that, that somehow life safety considerations are, should be sacrificed for something, right? And so I don't agree with that statement, but also I would hope the legislature wouldn't make a statement like that. But that's the key thing on this one, is that really have to separate out. There are important amendments that have happened over the last 4 code cycles for new knowledge based on life safety. So this bill is not clear what it's talking about. Thank you.
Angela?
Yeah, I submitted written testimony, basically kind of spelling out being opposed to, what is it, the section 4, which is talking about the building codes, but not 5. Basically spelling out that by doing this and going back to, and it kind of depends on how you read it, whether it's the previous 4 or 4 previous, it could be 2009 or 2012, depending on if you're like counting current. But assuming it's the 2012, I was spelling out that code was actually developed in 2009 and 2010. So it would be rolling back life safety 16 years. and eliminating all of the structural and life safety things that were updated. And basically saying that, you know, if you're trying to cut costs and you want to cut the energy code, then just do that, but stop lumping the building code and life safety in on top of it as what's causing the issues. So hopefully it dies.
All righty, anything else before I move on beyond this one? I wasn't gonna touch on any more bills, but I'll give a quick overview of the upcoming meetings for the week. Coming up here, we've got, 5552, an executive session on today. It's actually probably just passed. We have tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. during our council meeting, 5249 going into executive session. This is the one that we talked about in relation to I believe 55. Oh, I'm gonna start not remembering accurately. Hold on. In relation to, so 5429 and 5552 are related. So those are both going into session. And then looking at the appropriations here on the 22nd. So far, nothing for us to really worry about going to over the weekend, but there is potential that something could pop up. And so just that was the last part of my legislative update.
All right, well, that's quite a bit. Let me get back to my agenda here, wherever it is. I think I buried it in about 200 other windows.
I got it, of
Oh,
course.
you got it there. Okay. Well, does anybody else have anything else, any of these other items that they want to bring up, or any new other business? Not seeing any hands. No, that you don't get much of a chance for a free-for-all in these meetings here, but we do have 8 minutes, so I don't want to burn them unnecessarily. But if nobody's got anything else with regard to bills and stuff, I knew I'd get one. Hi, Micah. What do you got?
Just a quick question, and maybe I'm out of the loop on this one. Does anyone have an update on SHB 1353, the self-certification bill? Jay, you seem to be really in the know where these are sitting in committees right now. So if anybody's got info on that one, I think that's a.
That's not what I'm tracking like that. I'm sorry.
Okay. No worries. Thanks. Angela's.
What is this one regarding?
This
Pretty
is
sure I
the,
just looked at it and it went out of executive session. I think it went forward. Did it not? I think it was this morning. No? Oh, maybe I'm,
Right.
no, it did. It went out.
it's
Yeah,
in
it's in
the
the rules.
rules review. And this is the one that lets registered architects self-certify application packages for ADUs. And I don't think that we have anything that directly impacts the SBCC on this one. But that is a concern I know for local officials determining completeness of the package.
Yeah, that's kind of where the question lies is, I mean, based on one RCW, it says the building officials required to enforce the codes that you all adopt. However, this says, yeah, but if it's stamped, they don't get to enforce anything. Especially in plan
Until they
review.
identify through random audit that there's issues in.
Yeah. And then what do you do after that? That'll be a fun process.
Well, I think it's optional for jurisdictions. It's not saying that we have to, it's letting a jurisdiction do it. If I
guess they
remember
may.
Yeah.
To just defer the liability or to
Slippery slope
retract
on
it?
that one. Yep. Slippery slope on that one, but I know there are jurisdictions that do some of this already, but Thank you for the update on it. I will let everyone have a nice day.
All right, anything else? Okay, well, we'll see probably most everybody tomorrow. All right.
Yep.
Thanks,
This is
everyone.
Thank you.
adjourned.
Bree. Appreciate
Thanks.
the time.